Okay, welcome to everybody that's online. We're talking to you from St Andrews. We're in the St Andrews seminar room, and there are a number of people here. We've got 14 other people online, and Martyn Cox, who's going to be our speaker today, is based in Edinburgh. Martyn leads for Marine Scotland on the policy side in the development of the National Marine Plan Interactive. Some of you may know about the website and may have actually interrogated and used it. It's growing in size and complexity and importance. Martyn was also instrumental in developing and helping to develop Scotland's Marine Atlas, which many of you will be familiar with as well. In terms of the protocol of this particular meeting, what we'll do is, some of you will be used to this webinar system. What you have to do is that if you have a question, you'll find a little symbol that allows you to raise a hand. If you raise a hand, then what we will do is sequentially go through and let you ask your questions at the end of the presentation, and Martyn will be able to respond to you directly. So without further ado, I'll pass you over to Martyn Cox.
Okay, thank you very much, Mark, for both the introduction and the invitation to speak to you today. Yes, I've given the title of this talk, National Marine Plan Interactive, The Journey So Far. Gives me an excuse to talk about Scotland's Marine Atlas, but actually that is very much a critical part of the process we've been through, and it's been quite a journey that we started in 2008. Here's the structure, what I'm going to talk about today. I'll give a little bit about the Atlas, why, how and what, why we then developed NMPi, run through some of the screenshots and tell you what's on it, a few conclusions about the whole process, but also explain MASTS and NMPi. How can the MASTS community become involved? Because I think that's something you might be interested in. I'll then look at next steps and challenges, and there'll be a time for questions. So, Scotland's Marine Atlas, why? Well, 2008 saw us develop Scotland's marine seas when our director at the time said, can you tell me what the state of Scotland's seas is, given we've got a marine bill looming? And by the way, I want the answer in about 4 months. Well, FRS, SEPA, SNH, and MASTS, in the form of Ian Boyd at the time, we all got together and we developed Scotland's seas toward understanding their state. A clunky title, but it really was what it said on the tin, because it certainly wasn't the full understanding of their state, and certainly was only a part of that process. So, of course, we also knew the Marine Bill was going through Parliament. We then had the Marine Act in 2010, which has given us obligations. Where we have a National Marine Plan and regional marine plans, we must prepare an assessment of the condition of the Scottish marine area. It says in section 5b, so a duty to do it. That must include a summary of significant pressures and impacts of human activity. And each time we prepare a reviewed marine plan, then we have to review the underlying data. So in 2011, paving the way, because we'd said in the foreword of the 2008 document that we would do it, there was a full State of the Scotland Seas report in the form of Scotland's Marine Atlas. How did we do it? Well, we took what was in the 2010 document, which gave us very much the structure. We followed that same structure. There was also going on at the same time a UK document charting progress to the state of UK seas. A lot of scientists were involved in preparing data for that, so we took the Scottish data of that. We added additional Scottish data on colour, and we used subdivisions of what were the charting progress to areas, and we created the Atlas. We had a steering group to do that, and there are the members you can see in the bottom right-hand corner, the MASTS logo. Again, it was Ian Boyd involved for that process. So what was in Scotland's Marine Atlas? I've already mentioned that we were looking at the structure. We structured it around Scotland's vision for the seas. On the top right, left-hand corner of this slide, you can see Scotland's vision for clean, health, safe, productive, biologically diverse marine and coastal environments. So there were chapters written by the organisations whose logos appear next to them on the various aspects of this. And what I'm hoping is that you'll be reasonably familiar perhaps with the overall philosophy and perhaps general content of Scotland's Marine Atlas. What was also quite important was we had in it an overall assessment. This was the first time this had been undertaken for Scottish waters at this sort of level of detail. Here you have on the left-hand side the assessment for clean and safe seas that was undertaken by SEPA. On the right, a productive seas assessment. Not so much what is the impact of these activities on the marine environment, but looking at it from an economic perspective. Has the trend been up or down in the level of economic activity? What could we say about the value of these? Then there was also, the productive assessment was actually undertaken by Marine Scotland, mainly by myself with assistance from colleagues. The last part of the overall assessment then was the healthy and biologically diverse part, which was undertaken by Scottish Natural Heritage, and this looked, and you can see on the left-hand side here, a habitats assessment, and on the right-hand side, a species assessment. These formed altogether a core at the beginning of the atlas, swiftly followed then by some pen pictures of sea areas around Scotland based on this sort of double-page spread, which gave you some photographs, some text, reproduction of the assessment, and some bathymetry maps, and nature of the nature of the bottom in the map. Moving swiftly on, because I don't want to spend too much time on the atlas, but I think it's important if you know what's in the atlas, why we've moved to where we're going now with NMPi. The next part of the atlas, Chapter 2, was on the physical characteristics, and I picked here a particular spread because it'll be of interest to some MASTS members. This particular graph shows data from the SAMS Tyree passage monitoring. So some short text about it, some pictures and a graph. And again, the monthly mean salinity measured at Tyree and the salinity anomaly measured at Tyree. So we'd used some data from the MASTS community where it was appropriate. Also within physical characteristics then, here you can see a double-page spread in the atlas, and I think this really emphasizes the coffee table atlas style approach that we're trying to adopt. Short, snappy text, interesting pictures, and interesting maps that would make it relatively easy for people to read. The next section was on clean and safe aspects of the marine environment. And here you'll see a list on the right-hand side of the subjects that you would probably expect to find in a topic, in a chapter covering these topics. This was prepared for us by SEPA, and again was mainly map-based where possible with graphs. We move into Chapter 4, and we covered healthy and biologically diverse parts of the marine environment. And here you'll see again the chapters, sections that you might expect on things like protected areas, intertidal rock, intertidal sediment, subtidal rock, etc. This was coordinated for us by SNH and JNCC. One particular spread you might be interested in here is the one on cold water coral reefs. Again, some short text, a map, and all the maps in this chapter took this sort of style where possible, and perhaps hard to see on the screen, but you'll see a series of green dots where cold water coral reefs are. But I highlight this one in particular because you'll see that the photograph on the left is from J. Murray Roberts, someone else who is working within the MASTS community at Herrick, what I understand. So some information from the MASTS community, or pictures, have found their way into the final production of the atlas. You'd expected to see it was in the list at the beginning for this chapter, work on seals too. So here we have a couple of maps, the left-hand one showing the SACs, but the right-hand one, based on data, of course, coming from the Sea Mammal Research Unit at St Andrews, is the numbers of grey seals at certain areas around Scotland. This very much is a whistle-stop tour. We now move on to Chapter 5, a productive part of Scotland's Marine Atlas. This, of course, is an area that's of even more interest for marine planning because it's showing us, well, where are the human activities taking place that we want to know a little bit more about. And there was a very long list of topics here that we covered, as you can see on that list. I'm not going to read them all. But if you're interested, I'm hoping you'll have a copy of the atlas handy, or you can have a look online. It's all there. But what we were doing here was, in a couple of pages, aquaculture, for instance, is covered by short text, why, or what, why, where, some graphs showing overall production figures, text on its contribution to the economy, text on pressures and impacts on socioeconomics and on the environment, and some photographs. And then in another double-page spread, this was one of those that sort of folded out, you have a map showing where all the active finfish and shellfish production sites were at that time, with some graphs showing production statistics and value, farm gate value. So you can get an idea immediately by looking at the graphs. Well, we obviously got large blue bars. This is where the activity is taking place. But also, of course, by us presenting the data in this way, it leaps out at you that all our sites are on the west coast and the Northern Isles and the east coast. It doesn't happen. And finally, we had a section towards the end on climate change. This was very much summary information which we took from Charting Progress 2 and the Marine Climate Change Impact Annual Report Card information. We just tried to present some summaries about the various sea areas around Scotland. So that is very much a whistle-stop tour through what was in Scotland's Marine Atlas. So why did we then go on and do NMPi? Well, the atlas was well received, but it literally was just a hard copy, of course, and a snapshot in time. We put together a huge volume of data, and we must remember this was for the first time we'd done it at this sort of level of detail, and we'd undertaken an assessment of Scotland's seas. The very first time it had been done at this level of detail. There had previously been Charting Progress in 2005, which Scotland's seas were at that, but not in the level of detail that we did in Scotland's seas. So we had very much established an information base about Scotland's seas, and with marine planning coming along, the Marine Scotland Act, we knew that this was something we were going to have to keep up to date, and in fact the partners were very keen to do so. But actually quite a lot of work remained to be done. By taking the Atlas approach, you had to turn a page to find data on something else. You didn't have the option of overlaying data in a way of wanting to build up layers to what was going on in an area altogether. We also knew that we were going to need a lot more data for regional planning. We'd compiled together here a lot of national data sets, some of which of course have regional aspects to them, but there probably would be a lot more information out there at the regional level we might require for regional planning. We were also using data mainly from the statutory data collectors or statutory environment monitoring bodies. There would be data possibly that we need and could quite validly use for marine planning that would come from others. And we certainly wanted to make sure that the Atlas snapshot didn't just fade into history, but we could build on that and keep it up to date. We also needed to engage with stakeholders on what they were thinking of the overall evidence. The strapline on the front of the Atlas is information for the National Marine Plan. So one of the things we propose to do when going out for consultation on the National Marine Plan is ask stakeholders, well, what do you think of the information base on which this is built? What have we left out, etc. So NMPi has evolved. This is where you'd find it if you go to Marine Scotland's website. In fact, there's a data and science area, or science and data, you'll see in the menu on the left, Data Marine Atlas and Marine Scotland Interactive. And if you click on the middle one, National Marine Plan Interactive, it will take you there quite easily. So what are the basics of what you get on National Marine Plan Interactive? Well, you have some tools running along there on the top left-hand side, the sort of things you expect, pan, zoom, information about, some technical information, the fact that it's based on GeoServer, open source software. You'll see in the middle at the top there's registration possible. I'd encourage you to do that. It's free of charge. It allows you access to more functionality, for instance, the ability to download data where that's possible, and also printing maps, and also to add in your own information to the system for your own use. No one else would necessarily see that unless you choose to share it. If you're also a registered user, it allows us to keep track, and if we have spotted errors and we need to alert people, we can do so but it is free to do so. You'll see a layer control menu there on the right-hand side too, where the structure, you can see physical characteristics, clean and safe, healthy, large, diverse, productive. No prizes in seeing where that's come from, both Scotland seas and, of course, the vision the government has for the seas, and then also at the bottom some administrative layers which have things like a 3-mile limit, 6-mile limit, 12-mile limit, 200-mile limit, etc. And the base layer, and in fact the mapping, the base mapping we have here is OpenStreetMap. And you'll see this, you can change the scale at the bottom left. So those are your basic functions. It is not a fully online, a fully fledged GIS with every functionality you would expect. If you want that, well, you go away and buy a GIS system. This is just to allow you to do certain things online, but it does have GIS, a certain amount of GIS capability. So what about its current content? Well, at the last count last week we had 203 layers spread amongst all those different groupings on the system. And perhaps an important point to point out here is the bottom line where it says WMS feeds. Those 203 layers have obviously all been, we've collected the data from somebody, so sorry, but 198, won't it? We've collected the data from somebody, we've had to do a certain amount of work on it to upload it onto the GIS server which serves up on this system. But in doing that, of course, there's room for human error. We don't necessarily, well, data can be changed. We then have to go and get the latest information as and when we want it, if it's been updated. By having web map service feeds, and here we have some from SEPA and one from BGS at the moment, it means that when you turn a layer on this system, the system is going and asking the WMS feed provider, and it's being shown, if you like, in real time from their website. So the ones we have at the moment, say, are from BGS and SEPA, the ones from SEPA being Water Framework Directive status for coastal and transitional waters and also for bathing waters. So we're getting the most up-to-date information that SEPA are pumping out are coming into this system. That is certainly a preferable way to go for an organisation like ourselves, because it saves having to do a lot of administrative work on data with, of course, the potential for error to creep in. You can also zoom in, and here what you see on the right-hand side is the productive seas group opened. You have a little I button, which I'll explain in a moment. Next to that, about halfway down, you'll see a blue floppy disk. If you're a registered user, the blue floppy disk means that there are data here that if I click on that, I can download the data, and you go through a click license to get to it. The white box next to it turns the layer on and off. I mentioned just now the I button next to a layer. What that takes you to is an associated story page. So a little bit of information about the layer, and you'll see here it's telling you what is it, and at the bottom of that giving a data source. It's giving you a link to where you might find more information on that subject in the atlas. On the right hand side, the National Marine Plan, there'll be a link to relevant parts of the National Marine Plan when we get around to publishing it sometime soon. Then there's a box at the bottom giving places where you could go for perhaps more information, and then a little table at the bottom which is showing you documents that you might be able to download. If you are familiar with what was in Scotland's Marine Atlas, particularly in the Productive Seas section, there were lots of graphs around maps. What we've done is the spreadsheet on which there's a base, we're now updating them. You'll see here it says at the bottom, ship-to-ship oil transfers in Scottish ports 2005 to 2011. There's been a couple of extra years added from what was in the Atlas and something up to 2009. We will put additional information as and when we get hold of it and keep these sort of things up to date. And then when you do get a spreadsheet to download, and here's an example of the one for port statistics. So in the top left you're seeing some raw data which comes from Scotland's transport statistics, what's been going through various ports in Scotland. There are some graphs drawn underneath it, and you'll find these are the same graphs that we used around a map of Scotland in the Atlas, but what we've done is just added the extra years on so that we can now sort of extend the time series. And this is available to download as a spreadsheet, and then you can take it away and use it. Yes, it only comes from data that's in Scottish Transport Statistics, data that you could have got hold of anyway. It's not that it's anything that isn't publicly available. What we've done is just present it in a slightly different way. Scottish Transport Statistics does not present it in this sort of way as the way we did it in the Atlas. So what about a little bit more about NMPi, what you can see on it. Here, zoomed in here to part of Shetland, and I've got a few layers turned on. I've got aquaculture sites, so you've got the green triangles and the blue dots. You've got oil and gas coastal installations, which is the bigger green triangle. Sullombo is just off the top. Sorry, Scapa Flow is just off. I was right the first time. Sullombo is just off the top. We've also got some of the ferry routes, the inter-island ones. We've got the ports marked on as red dots, and the large blue areas actually are the Saltire Prize regional locational guidance areas for waves. Okay, it's a fairly random selection of things perhaps to pick, but it shows the sort of things that you can do with this system. You can choose the scale at which you wish to work, although I would say that one or two data layers where it's inappropriate for you to zoom right in and still have the data showing, we put them turned off. Sometimes the data are not precise enough to be able to show right completely zoomed in. I think when people see things on screens like this, they expect a certain level of precision. Where we appreciate that that isn't necessarily the case with certain data, then they'll be turned off if you zoom all the way in. So that, if you like, is taking a more local view using NMPi. You can also take a national picture, and I just got a couple of layers turned on here. Again, coastal locations for the Ministry of Defence and some renewables layers, the offshore wind plant areas of search. So if you're particularly interested in where one of those was, perhaps in relation to a firing range, up near Cape Wrath, for instance, you can see where the two are fairly close together. It is very much down to the user, though, to decide what they want to turn on and off at any one time. And of course, depending on what your expectations are from a system like this, and also what your expectations are if you put lots of data layers on that aren't necessarily going to work very well together, well, that is very much down to the end user. I also mentioned about the ability, if you're a registered user, to put some information in of your own. And you'll see here on the right-hand side that the top grouping, My Information and User Data, is highlighted. What this means is that not the 12-mile limit that you can see, that happens to be a part of the base map anyway, but there are some boundaries, some sort of purple lines coming out from the coast out towards the 12-mile limit. Those are in fact some boundaries that I've created myself based on something that we had in the Atlas, which showed regions between OSPAR monitoring points where we have riverine inputs to the sea. They're based on sub-areas, and those have labels in the Atlas. And I was trying to work out how I could create those because, believe it or not, there wasn't a data set around. It was drawn on a map somewhere, but there wasn't a digital data set. So this shows what you can do. You can draw these, and you'll see then when it comes to use of the legend under layer control, we've just switched the tab from layer to legend. Initially your features can show it in blue as draft, you can submit them, you can review them, they can be processed. These data would show on your system, on your logon. Once they can reach a stage where you can alert us, and we can take them on board and show them as a data layer to others, make them publicly available, if you like. We haven't had much use of this part of the system yet. We're not quite sure how it's going to work. But there is the ability for you to put a certain amount of information. And you'll see that on the top there's something called data editing tools. These are the buttons that allow you to do the editing of the data you put in. You can put in point data, line data, and polygon data, and add attributes. I'd also like to mention at this stage that not only does Marine Scotland have National Marine Plan Interactive, but we have something else called Marine Scotland Interactive. This developed at about the same time as NMPi, but this is very much geared towards where you'll go, or where we've been placing a lot of data that have been collected as the renewables push for marine renewable energy has been happening. A lot of data, raw data in many cases, have been collected and then placed on MSI. It doesn't have the mapping functions of NMPi, but if you're wanting to get raw data that we've been able to make, that we can make available, you'll find it on MSI. And you'll see the themes down here on the left-hand side on marine spatial planning, monitoring, renewables, MPAs, SPAs. There's not only renewable data of collected by the renewables industry or for us on behalf of them, but also some other raw data that they might find useful. So, what about a few conclusions about NMPi? At the moment, I think it's fair to say that it's reasonably well populated, but it certainly isn't complete. I think there are probably many, many more layers that we could add to it if you want to be able to add details of various activities that are going on so that you have a comprehensive overview to help you with marine planning. We've certainly got a lot. There are probably many more we could add, and we have the ability to do that. Where we're able, we can make the data available to be downloaded. But I think it must be remembered that Marine Scotland is not necessarily the source of all the data on NMPi. We rely on data coming in from many other sources. So I think probably that what we will be making available to download probably will only be what is sourced for ourselves. We also run into certain licensing restrictions in data that sometimes we can show on the system if we've had to purchase it and there are licensing restrictions, and in fact someone else as an end user wouldn't be able to look at it here, but we've given the source, and if you want the data for yourselves then you'd have to go to the same people that we got it from. One example of that, for instance, would be the Royal Yachting Association. We've had to enter into a license to be able to show the data on this system, but that's part of their business. If you want the data for your own GIS, you're going to have to sign a license with them in the same way that we did. But in the meantime, if you want to be able to overlay their data with other data that we've got, you can do it here. The graphs that were, I think, quite a useful feature in Scotland's Marine Atlas, we're now updating those, or starting to update them where we can, and presenting them as Excel spreadsheets. But since the content of those graphs, or those spreadsheets in the public domain anyway, there isn't any problem in being able just to allow people to download the spreadsheet. We are already working with the partners who we created Scotland's Marine Atlas in order to keep this system populated. So SEPA are helping us now with the data for the Clean and Safe Seas part of NMPi, SNH and JNCC for the healthy and biologically diverse, our own scientists obviously for the physical characteristics, etc. And MASTS is also involved with us. So I think we now have a system that is probably just about set for going out to consultation on our National Marine Plan. You may be aware that we're due to do that fairly soon. This will actually be a fundamental part of the consultation exercise, allowing people to look at the system and say, well, these are the data we've got, this is how we managed to get the information to create a National Marine Plan. These are the underlying data on which this policy might be based, or these are the underlying data on which an interpretation was made to create this policy. I'd also say if you're interested in using NMPi when you're out in the field, then we do have a mobile device available. So if you have an iPad or other sort of tablet, there's a slightly different version available where the functionality has been tailored for that sort of platform. So yeah, a mobile device is available, and if you're online, you're browsing, it's recognised that you're on something like an iPad, and the appropriate version will be there for you. So if you're out on site, you can do that. Of course, you'll also be aware that we published an e-publication version of the Atlas back at a MASTS event a few months ago, and that's available too, although of course even as an e-publication that suffers perhaps the similar sort of problems as a PC version, in so much the Atlas itself, you can't overlay layers. So I thought it's worthwhile mentioning how can MASTS perhaps even get further involved in NMPi, something you might be interested in if you've got data out there. Hopefully by some of the examples I've picked, you'll see that MASTS data were actually involved in Scotland Seas 2008. I didn't show that earlier, but actually that there were a couple of case studies that came from within the MASTS community. But certainly the Atlas in 2011, we obviously showed we have data from Tiree Passage, SMRU. Mark actually sits with us on the what we're calling sort of updating the Atlas steering group, so that anything that needs to be input from the MASTS community can be done in that way. Of course, it is possible that Marine Scotland will commission work. We have done this on many occasions. Sometimes through tender, sometimes in other ways. Some layers, for instance, that are about to go up on NMPi very shortly are out of work that was recently undertaken by SMRU. Data collected by SMRU, we commissioned them to create certain maps of where the seals were, both on their holdout sites and at sea. And in fact, we're going to use some of those. So that was work that Marine Scotland had commissioned. But the wider community actually may find that you've actually got some data sets that you think actually those would be useful either for national or regional marine planning. And we're happy to consider if anyone has data that they think might be suitable. I mentioned just now we have a steering group, and what would happen is the steering group would have a look at anything we were being offered. But I think there is a platform there if people have done specific work that they think needs wider exposure. You might already have maps. I can't imagine work's done these days without some JS analysis. You might already have shapefiles. They're shapefiles you're going to publish in some way anyway. We're more than happy to consider whether those might be appropriate for putting on NMPi, and that's something to say that the steering group would consider and at its sort of regular meetings. What I would say at this point, though, is that NMPi we're seeing as a platform for QA'd data. I put QA'd in brackets. I think it has to be some sort of interpretation of what QA means. I think there's a very different interpretation perhaps of what QAs mean in a scientific field when people are creating papers to then perhaps just government statistics, and some people might think, well, are those really QA to the same sort of level? But you need to know the provenance of where information is coming from to be confident that you can put it up there. But one thing I would point out there too, that NMPi is not just a platform for general research, PR, public relations, but if there's something that's relevant to marine planning, we're more than happy to consider including it. So what about our next steps and challenges? I've divided this into a couple of areas. And the first one, I think, is the content of NMPi. We still, I think, are identifying the breadth of the evidence we need for marine planning. We've got a lot already. There's probably a lot more that we need to collect. So we're going about identifying the breadth of the evidence we need. We certainly need to improve our data in terms of granularity. In some areas we're perhaps going to need more information at a greater granularity from its regional planning. One of the things that you might have noticed from those screenshots I showed you of the system is that at the moment you think to yourself, wait a minute, but the sea is plain blue, why is there no bathymetry on there? Yes, it certainly needs that, and in fact that's coming soon. We're certainly also looking to get as much content as we can by WMS feeds, and we certainly have a few more avenues to pursue on that one. So that's looking at the content. There's quite a bit more that we need to do. In terms of its structure, there are things we need to do as well. We need to improve NMPi's functionality and some of its presentation. In fact, there are already certain structural changes to it in hand. If you have a look at the moment, wasn't perhaps apparent from the slides I showed you, but there are the layers in the layer control need much more structuring and grouping to be able for the end user to more easily navigate their way around them, and that's already in hand. And we know we're going to need something different for regional marine planning, or we're not quite sure yet. Some of the other challenges we have are very much about of general in nature. Licensing issues regarding data, how best to get hold of data to show here. Many people can understand what we're trying to do and try to give a full breadth in here, but they really would prefer people to go to them for data where possible. So we still have some licensing issues to resolve. We're very keen to take stakeholder feedback and also learning from others. We're not unique in doing this. The MMO is developed its own portal, for instance, for regions around England, and we talk to them. Another challenge, I think, that is certainly one that we're starting to think about is how do we develop our next overall assessment. So we've collected a lot of evidence, but how do we draw that together at some point into a future overall assessment so that we can see then whether the overall state of our seas are improving or otherwise. Okay, that was all I wanted to say. I think it's useful, and if anyone has any questions, I'll try and elaborate then.
Martyn, with these sorts of systems, it's very difficult for people to show their appreciation because everybody's dissipated around the country. So we're actually thinking about a system where we have canned applause at the end, so we can just push a button and everybody says thank you that way. So that's a foible of the system. What I'll make sure is that everybody's now open to ask questions. Bertie Armstrong has got his hand up, so we'll just unmute Bertie and ask Bertie to ask his first question. Hello, Bertie.
Hello. Hi. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
It's a very clever system. That really is. Okay. Thanks very much indeed, Martyn. That's highly illuminating. A couple of fairly basic questions, if I might, and these might be in the category of daft laddie, but it's probably worth having a quick look. The reason for a national marine plan in the first place was at least in part statutory, in order that Scotland may fall due to all the competences that were going to be given to it, provided the national marine plan fitted inside. Given that, and given its title, NMPi's evolution to date is now absolutely clear from Martyn's presentation. But given its title, will the plan, when it's consulted upon, contain such things as the following regions will make decisions? They will make decisions on the following basis, or is that will that lie somewhere else? Because that's the sort of thing you expect to see in something with the English title National Marine Plan.
Can you repeat the crux of your question towards the end there, please, Bertie? I wasn't sure I followed you.
Yeah, the crux of the question, the content of the plan we've now got. Are we going to get in the consulted plan, apart from statements like we want clean, healthy, productive, biodiverse seas, administrative instructions as to how planning will happen? Because that's the sort of thing you might expect to have in a national marine plan.
Okay, administrative instructions to how planning will happen.
Yeah,
Okay, I can't answer that one. I don't actually know.
Okay, that's fine.
But what I'm happy to do is let Anna know about that question and get her to contact you.
That'd be great. Yeah, I mean, it all will be revealed in the forthcoming consultation on said National Marine Plan, which we're expecting this month. Yeah, do you happen to know a
Yes.
date, Martyn? That's the other thing.
Soon.
Okay.
I don't. Well, at least I do, but I don't, it's not public yet.
Okay, fine. Rumor has it at our end it's at or about the 24th somewhere. But you on the grounds of what you just said, you wouldn't possibly be able to comment. So, so that's okay.
Correct.
Okay, thanks for passing that on to Anna, and we'll address that with her. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, thanks, Percy.
Sorry about that.
We'll just pass on to Hamish Mayer at Herrick Watt. So, Hamish, if you wanted to unmute and ask a question.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, it's just that on visiting other countries and giving PowerPoint presentations and so on MASTS and Marine Act, Scotland Act issues, there really is a great deal of interest always arises from the Marine Atlas, the digital paper version and so on, and the interactive version. Is there any official Scottish Government discussions with overseas governments on advice for their sort of plans? And the second part of the question, I know you did say this isn't really a marketing tool, but could it be a marketing tool for mass academic community to help initiate international research collaborations, since the interest has arisen from what's being done in Scotland, and there could be research interest there?
Okay, that's two parts. No, we're not in any official discussions with other countries about what we've done here, but one of the things we are a member of is actually ICANN, the International Coastal Atlas Network, and we have publicized what we're doing through that. In fact, I gave a presentation at their conference 2 years ago in Ostend. But since we've developed NMPi, it might be a good idea to push that out, but unfortunately this year's conference was in British Columbia and we couldn't really justify traveling to British Columbia. But we certainly are making the ICANN community aware of what we're doing. The second question was on the marketing tool. How this gets used overall. I think initially through marine, we have to use it as the information base for marine planning. How much you can then use it for marketing, or whether you actually are making connections and getting research collaborations going, I'm not sure. I think you'd need to have a discussion with people who knew how best to do those things before you could determine whether this was a good place to do it, or whether you'd actually need something that was more tailored towards doing that.
Yeah, it's just the fact that MASTS, being the way it is structured with universities and Marine Scotland science, there is that academic and government linkage, and that's sometimes where the overseas issues, or talking to overseas government ministries, that's where the interest is. So, I mean, okay, academics can use it to say, this is what we do here, why don't we work together? But you wouldn't want Marine Scotland to be too involved in that. Is that what I'm hearing?
No, I didn't say we didn't want us to be too involved. I'm saying I don't know whether this is actually the right vehicle to actually publicise that sort of thing. It might be that something else is needed rather than what is intended to be just a web-based GIS mapping tool. People wouldn't necessarily go to this if they were looking for the sort of things I think you're alluding to.
Okay. No,
And it might be more dedicated web pages geared up towards getting people to work together. This might be something that was pointed to suggest this is the sort of thing that's going on in Scotland. How do we then work together to do something more like this? But I'm not sure if this is the right vehicle to do that. I'm assuming I'm understanding what you're getting at correctly, Hamish.
Yeah, I think that's basically, and I do understand that. It's just, the first thing was just whether you were working officially with any other governments who might want to sort of replicate this system. But,
no, we're not working with anyone, but as I say, we talked to the MMO, what they're doing for England. I gave a presentation to a delegation from the Chinese government that was over last year about the Atlas and NMPi. And a colleague of mine did it recently for a group that was over from some part of the States. So I think when we do get delegates from other parts of the world, we do mention what we're doing, but it's not necessarily done in a way that we're doing it this way, therefore it's right, therefore you should do what we're doing.
yeah.
But if people show an interest, we'd certainly tell them a lot more about it.
Okay, I think that answers my question. Many thanks.
Okay.
Okay, thanks, Hamish. We've got another question from Tim Stianovich. Hi, Tim. Are you still there? Okay, Tim's gone silent on us. I've just got a question for you, which is partly for my information, but hopefully for a wider audience as well, and that's the relationship between the NMPi and the Scottish Environment Web, which is obviously being developed as well. And I wondered whether you could just comment on that.
Well, the SE Web is something that is going to, well, that's across the whole of the Scottish public sector. So it looks all land, all sea, and a variety of policy areas, including air, soils, all that sort of thing. It's also intending to do much more about reporting, I think, state of the environment work. NMPi is something that is geared up towards marine planning and therefore expecting to have a lot of detail that helps you with marine planning. And there will be an element of environment reporting linked into it.
Okay. But the source for Scottish Environment Web for marine data will effectively be the Atlas. There won't be a dual process.
That's the intention. That's what we've asked them to do. There shouldn't be a dual process.
Okay, that's good. We've also got a question just coming in from Finlo Cotier. So, Finlo?
Hello?
Hello, Finlo.
Martyn, can you hear me?
You just have to speak up a bit.
Okay, Martyn, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah. Nice presentation, Martyn. Really interesting. One of the conclusions you had was the need to fill in some of the gaps, and you mentioned the sort of incomplete nature of some of the layers. Which of those layers do you feel needs the greatest effort at the moment in terms of the end user requirements and the volume of material that's already within those layers?
I can't answer that because I don't know.
Okay.
I'm just conscious that there's probably a few, but I haven't sat down and thought which one needs to be filled in first. Sorry. I suppose I'm hoping we'll get that out to we'll get that out to the public consultation exercise. People will tell us.
Right. Okay.
But I don't have a list of which ones I think.
Yeah. Just sort of to follow up on that, I noticed you had those WMS feeds.
Yeah.
And that's, just to clarify, that's updating from a remote server somewhere else. Is that right? You're updating the layer based on what's contained within the server somewhere else.
So the layers I mentioned were Water Framework Directive and Bathing Water, for which SEPA are responsible. So they're publishing the data. They're responsible for publishing it. They are the statutory monitor of that sort of thing.
Right.
So they publish it on their website. They're publishing it as a WMS feed. So rather than get the data from them, say, on a floppy disk or by email, and then we have to process it to put it up, we can take a WMS feed, which is just an exceedingly complex URL, and get a direct feed from their website. So the moment they change the information, the next time we go, which might to our system goes to harvest that layer from them, if they updated it 30 seconds ago, we get the updated layer.
Right. So
It's
do you have any link?
it's doing it in real time.
Yeah. Do you have any link into British Oceanographic Data Centre at all?
Not yet. I'm not aware of any WMS feeds they prepare.
Okay. Neither am I.
We've got one to BO.
The physical
We've
layers.
got one to BGS.
Right.
But it's still early days.
Just a thought.
That's great.
Sorry, we were just getting confused slightly, but just a thought, and it just leads on from what Finlo is saying, is that is there you've got a consultation process going on, but with respect to the steering group, is it worth some sort of more formal process for assessing data deficiencies, and also
Yes.
what other WMS feeds might be available?
Yes.
Okay. At the moment, we don't have other hands up, apart from... we've got Tim Stianovich back, so we'll just ask Tim if he just wants to ask his question. Hello, Tim.
Hello, can you hear me? I'm in audio-only mode.
We can hear
Hello?
you.
Oh,
We
you
can
can
hear
hear me. Oh, sorry. I didn't realise that. I just switched from my computer to my telephone so you could actually hear me. I wrote down 3 or 4 questions for Martyn, and I don't know if you can see them, Martyn asked. I felt that to be fair, you want to choose which one you'd like to answer, but if you can't see them written down there, I know that I have my favourite one.
I can't see anything written down on my screen, I'm afraid.
Okay. Well, one of them was just what do you folks intend to do about sort of the mismatch between the charting progress areas and the regional marine plan areas? Do you have any ideas about a way forward with that issue?
The mismatch, CP2 areas and Scottish marine regions. Not yet is the answer to that one. We chose the CP2 areas or the subsets of them because they had been around for quite a while, and we already had quite a lot of monitoring data that had been cut that way. So we've been cutting our productive seas data in the same way, purely to get us used to the idea of cutting economic data, I guess. How this is going to work, because they don't match the Scottish marine regions, you're right.
But they may do in places, I suppose, like the Forth or something, or the Clyde.
Well, they do-ish in places. What we do about it, I don't know yet. So we're open to suggestions, I think.
Well, on a more positive note, can I ask one more question, which is, outline the role of scientists in producing data that might contribute to decision making. What are your thoughts on a field like something like tourism recreation? That's obviously an area for which there's not necessarily a single government agency that is responsible, yet it's a kind of field of human activity that people often claim is quite important for the marine GDP. I mean, do you see a role for scientists of different kinds contributing data on an issue like that? How do you think that might work with something like NMPi?
We recognise that is a gap, and in fact we already have sort of pilot studies underway to collect information. For instance, we're doing pilot work, I think, in the Penton, Firth and Orkney waters, so we'll see what comes out of that. But if there's a place for scientists to help in that, good. I must admit, I don't know who's doing that work for us. Someone else is involved in the commissioning of it. But I know that there is work being done because we know that we need a lot more information on the whole leisure scene.
Well, thank you for that information, and good luck with what you're doing. It's very helpful to get an introduction to a big tool like this to find one's way around it.
Well, if you do look at it and have questions on it and can suggest things that don't work quite right on it, improvements, etc., we're happy to take suggestions. Not necessarily say we can implement every one, but we're happy to hear what other people have to say.
Thanks, Tim. We have another question now coming in from Glison Philippe. Glison? No, nothing coming back in on that one as yet. Okay. I think we've now exhausted all the questions, unless there are any from here. No? Okay. So thank you to everybody for taking part. I hope it's been as interesting as we've found it at this end. We will be recording this session, so it will be available on the MAST website, hopefully within the next few days, if you need to refer it to colleagues or see it again. So great thanks to Martyn for being the guinea pig. I think this is the fourth webinar that we've done, and probably the most successful. So thanks to everybody for taking part, and we'll be in touch with another webinar soon. Thanks, Martyn.
Okay, thank you.